Following on from the other day in the tarot, we move from the Fool to the Magician. So, from one card with enough going on in it, with the Fool, to three beautiful cards, each illustrating rather uniquely the concepts and components of the Magician. And I really like this particular card we have here, which, rather than showing the embodiment in a human sense of the Magician, we have it embodied by nature. And this is from the wonderful tarot deck called the Alchemists Garden, which I'm starting to get into more and more as a wonderful tarot deck that, let's just say, puts things as they are. A mushroom is a mushroom. It's many things, but it is always a mushroom. And a lot of times within tarot, there is components of imagery which are representative of ideas and concepts, which is where we get symbolism. Symbols are basically what we have gained writing from. I was learning the other day about connections with the tarot to Egypt and hieroglyphs via the alphabet, which was 22 letters, which is perhaps why, but originally in ancient scripts that came from the pictographs or hieroglyphs from Egypt. So when some people say tarot has connections to Egypt, I think they're elucidating on and enlightening on that particular representation. And so it is quite interesting that from pictures, from us being able to see things, we've developed language, essentially. Or at least the forms of written language, which aren't actually too dissimilar from spoken language. And with that kind of said, I'll move to some place to start with the mage, and I'll talk about the card on the left. This lovely one here from the Alistair Crowley, Lady Frida Harris Thoth deck. And I'll start where I started talking before about the particular imagery you'll see on the right of this card: an ape or a baboon in the background. And this baboon is portrayed in different lights, but is associated with Thoth as a companion, a sort of scholarly type that I guess you could say worked as an intermediary between the god and men in some fashion. In particular to do with the gifts of language. Very important in this card because a lot of the symbolism you'll see in tarot decks associates the magician with Hermes slash Thoth slash Mercury, messenger god. And to deliver a message, more often than not, we are the vehicle for messages. So we need a language, we need a framing system, we need a understanding, a conceptualization, an ability to express. And the big key component of the magician, the mage, magic in general, is will, is the expression of a will. A lot of people might interpret this as one's will, and they're not wrong. This is the card number one. but it is a slight deviation. I would call it a slight deviation from a more subtler trace. Sorry, a more subtler truth. Truth is often dressed up and has layers and aspects added to it, which eventually can be seen to distort. And what I really like with including the magician card, which is psilocybe cubensis, magic mushrooms, or a particular type of magic mushroom, is that it poses the question of whose will really is the magic. Whose will is it serving? If it is serving solely the I, as in the self, selfishly for self gain, then that's a kind of like corruption. If you are the intelligence, and this is a strange way to put it, we always are the intelligence above self. But if you're in a lower state of self and greed and these sorts of energies and try and work magic, let's say, one's will to create change and influence this realm, then good luck. That's yeah, just pretty much like, you do that at your own risk and peril, I would say. When we learn that that self is a connection to so many things, and that there are intelligences that work through us, such as the consumption of psychoactive plants, we can then recognize that we are vehicle for the divine commune, and it's not so much as about self. This might seem paradoxical, but it really kind of isn't. Maybe the way I'm explaining it could do with some work. Another aspect to talk about within this card, which you can see quite nicely illustrated here, is the concept of as above, so below. So it's definitely about embodying the divine message, a divine truth, a divine intelligence that has power, and embodying it in the earth with one's will. I think the famous saying from Crowleyan Dilemma is love under will. So essentially you have to have the divine force, the will, the spark, the drive, also the desire is a component to drive something. Without that, it's an aimless vehicle. So you have to have that force to be an expression of what is to follow, what is descending. And essentially I see that as love, hence the term love under will, as it were. Also contained within the symbolism, more often than not in traditional tarot decks, is the four elements, or four suits, basically the four different pips, sometimes people call them, within playing cards and tarot. So the minor arcana, as it is sometimes known. And these are concepts, physical concepts that relate in a lot of mythologies of practical things. The practicalities of forces that we work with within this realm, and the tools that are representatives of those forces. Let's put it that way. And that maybe can be explored at some length with, once I get through the arcana major and into the minor and those sorts of things. Now, oftentimes, some people might mistakenly assume that the magician has a masculine edge, or can be portrayed as a masculine concept, but this is not true. Again, these cards if relatively done correctly, will portray some sense of androgyny, but not necessarily androgyny as not having either component of sex or gender, but having equal balance of both. And this is part of the magician's process, is to understand to understand each component within self, to drive, to be balanced. It's kind of like, non-balance is like driving a car with one flat tire. So there definitely is this particular component that may not be as obvious within the magician as well. So that's just a bit about the magician. I'll go back to the psilocybe cubensis, which I think is found in quite a lot of places in the world, quite commonly found in Australia, and more often than not growing out of dung. So it's a dung-loving psilocybe. There's many mushrooms that are, I guess, coprophilic, you could say, or dung-loving. But these ones grow exceptionally big. They're very, very noticeable. A lot of people grow them themselves at home, if they so choose to do this. And it's a really interesting situation and position where the world is in now, whereby a lot of things that have been deemed dangerous, illegal, limited, and people have been punished for, are now gaining a renaissance with understanding that they have potential benefits. And especially one of these is psilocybin as a chemical, or the plant, medicine. And it has great potentialities for healing. If used wisely and in the correct settings. I think they're looking at treating or helping to treat PTSD, pre-death anxiety is another thing. With an awareness that one thing that psilocybin and mushrooms talked about and known to do is connect you to a wider sphere of understanding, of acceptance that oneself is not separate from others. One being is connected to 1,000 other things, like a million other things, if we really allow ourselves to. And for the single cell, which might be used to a single-celled natured way of seeing or thinking or believing and perceiving, it can be quite shattering, quite big to realize, no, holy shit. They do come from that. Yeah. So they are great tools, but again, anything that if you overuse a particular tool or a particular way in any spiritual discipline or healing modality, if you overuse something beyond its point of necessity, it can do damage. A wonderful friend of mine said, when we're sick, we take medicine. When we're not sick, if we take medicine, we will become sick. So, and that one was maybe a little slow getting through to me, personally, as a lesson. So I thank this individual for their wisdom passed to me. Yeah. Now, I think that's majority of the symbolism is covered in this particular card. Although I think there is potentially, and there's so much more to it as well, but we can't talk forever. Yeah, and what I did read earlier this morning was talking about how sometimes symbols. This is why we have art. This is why we have writing. Sometimes symbols talk a purer and truer language, and that's why a lot of systems will say sit with cards, sit with an image, sit in silence. Terence McKenna, famous advocate for drug use with mushrooms in particular, said do 5 grams in silent darkness and then see where you go. So there is a beauty within that. And before I finish, I'm sure I've missed out lots of wonderful things about this, but there's always wonderful things left and to discover. I'll elevate this a little bit. See whether I can prop it up too successfully. Oh, sort of. Let's see. Slight rotation there. So this is another wonderful, wonderful deck, which I haven't really overly talked about, but this is Alchemical Visions. So there's a lot of alchemy happening here in this particular deck. Alchemist Garden, Alchemical Visions, and the Thoth deck is definitely not short in its alchemical symbolism. This one's wonderful because a lot of times you'll also see the mage holding a wand, the scepter of power, and one hand is raised up, and that is kind of like drawing in the divine, the will, the intelligence, the power, basically, to effect change in this world. And I really, really like this particular deck. The boldness of colour against the black and white is fantastic, and the oversized cards are beautiful as well. Oftentimes you'll see flowers depicted, and in particular for this card, the flower depiction is representative of desire, of passion. Without desire and passion, at least in the Western Hermetic and occult tradition, you're gonna struggle. You're gonna struggle to effect change in this world, if that is so what you wish and you choose. And my phone's getting unstable. I must finish up soon. I mean, the concept of trying to effect change in this world is to take seriously the consequence and the role that being alive implies to you. That you do have a purpose, you do have a mission. And when enough thoughts being settled and being settled down, some other aspects that get in the way of understanding this, there comes the realization, what the fuck am I going to do with my life? For it to be of worth. And it's essentially not, it can be as much as worth for self, but it's actually worth for the gift you've been given, worth for the sake of all, which really propels us towards acts in this world. And I really, really like this particular image. You've got kind of the snake eating the tail, which is very wonderful and very symbolic in ways of life, death, rebirth, but also a subtle reminder of the zero concept of the egg or of the full, realizing a journey need be taken, that you can't stay in self or the center or being. And very lovingly portrayed, we have this magician in this particular tarot deck, very active in that process of deciding that, you know, I'm going to walk the talk. I've formulated. I have will. I have desire for action, and so a lot of times, magician kind of card is a resounding kind of yes to to experience, to life, to one's visions, one's dream. But it's not just the yes, it's the actual process of stepping into power to do whatever it is. Um, and yeah, I think that's about it, really. Without going too far into other things. And it's self fertilization, which is an interesting concept. There is, um, within the mushroom, there is the spore and the mycelial network underneath, and within the magician, it's like has hatched oneself from the egg, and there's balance of gender within that. So it's understanding that we are our own creators and masters of destiny and fate, if we so allow it, and if we follow what is the divine inspiration or spark or calling, as it may be, and look within each individual. And it's a really cool place to kind of be, to feel that power and to trust in it and to create things, because this is a creative force. This is a creative realm we live in, and no one else is going to create your life or your vision or your amazingness as much as you can. And you have to be a driver within that. There are beings that help, that inform, that will lend hand, will do all sorts of stuff, but ultimately it's kind of on each being as an individual to do that. So I'll leave it at that and say, there we go. I believe next card is going to be fantastic. And I look forward to doing that one. Yeah, awesome. Cheers.